again. I appreciate everybody's attendance, and if you have been coming to this series, then you know that one of the things that we've really strived to do this year is reconnect with families. Throughout the pandemic, we know that parents were not welcome on campus. No guests were welcome on campus, and so this is one of our attempts to try to reconnect with everyone and get you more involved and back into the classroom, and certainly volunteering in the lunchroom is my favorite. He's a great Facebook post, and I don't do a lot of social media, but that picture is a keeper. Mark. If you want to go to the next slide for me. Throughout all of this, it's really done so that we can continue to strengthen our relationships with you and continue to build on our trust that you already have in us by allowing your children to come to school here every day. So I want to go over some of the recent things that have happened. We had 3 projects at the Regional Science Fair that are advancing to state. So that means we have 7 students and their families that are going to the State Science Fair in Athens. We're very excited about that. If for some reason you didn't know, our modern band, our rock band students were invited to go to the Journey concert. I'm happy to tell everybody what that whole story was. Suffice to say, it was a pretty incredible event, and the students got a chance to go and see not just the show, but kind of what it takes to put a show on. See the instrument text, see the lighting, sound, all of it. So it was really great. And then we had a gallery walk in 2nd grade. Students are working on a unit that we're going to kind of unpack what that means when we talk about curriculum today. But you can see that they're working there on some of the items related to studying stars and sky. Then our school-wide successes. We're going to talk about personnel and selection at next month's parent plug-in. But one of the things that we do around January each year is ask for a recommitment from the staff. If you're here and you want to stay here, let us know. For the first time in the last 4 years, we had 100% staff recommit so that they want to return. We talk a lot about trying to make this a teacher's dream job, and so we really worked to try to create a very collegial atmosphere, but also to incentivize the hard work that we know teachers do. So it was very exciting to see that 100% of those said, yes, I want to come back. We connected with the Georgia Port Authority. We got to go out and have a tour with them, and a couple of folks there connected with some of the people that they work with, and they want to come out and tour us, so those dates are still being worked out. To have a small group come here, find out more about what we do, and then really look at some pretty significant partnerships moving forward into the end of the year and into next year. And then our Maritime Fund, for those of you that have been tracking how our fundraising has been going and the philanthropic efforts of the community, we're at 70%, and there hasn't been a lot of movement from that, but we just had a board meeting on Monday evening, and board members took a packet because some of them are moving into a position of directly asking and sharing with some folks in the community, not just our parents looking to raise money from, but also folks that support this type of education, so that's happening as well.
I'll add too, we do have 2 upcoming fundraisers that should help bolster that as well. Bingo night is this Friday, and that's at 100% capacity. Thank you, Michelle, for working on that. And then we are going to have a fishing tournament mid-April. Details should be out like tomorrow.
Which is shaping up pretty nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really great. Really quickly too, for those of you that didn't know, our underwater robotics class adopted a float, and the float is basically spending its whole life drifting through the ocean. It comes to the surface, it dives back down. It's collecting data, but the kids were, of course, jazzed that Tybee Maritime Academy is on this float somewhere out in the ocean. And the great thing is, it's not just for the underwater robotics class. Like, we have access to that data for our research class, for our art class. Like, we can go in and look at all the information that it's gathering and then put that to really good use. But it was just exciting knowing, like, somewhere out in the ocean, there's a positive thing that has our name on it.
How did we find out about that, or how were we able to be part of it?
That was something, it was a connection with Mr. Paulo in that class, and through some of his work and just kind of following up with that. We have people reach out to us all the time. We're also working right now with WISE at Georgia Southern, which is a group that is looking at logistics, and so they reach out and kind of talk to him, and then he connects also with various teachers that he thinks could be a big part of supporting that work too. So he's working with actually our econ class, our students that are taking high school economics. They're also going to be working on supply chain stuff with them when they're here. So not just maritime engineering, but also econ. So we just get people to reach out, which is always fantastic, and we just try to connect them where we think it makes sense. As Ms. Beck will share, when we start looking at community partnerships and connections, it's rarely just for one purpose and one teacher and one thing. It's usually the beginning of like introducing people to the spider web of the way curriculum works here. Bye. I'm gonna get, just so you guys, in case you don't know, Ms. Beck serves basically the role of assistant principal here, but she is our director of curriculum and instruction. So when we're working with teachers, creating units and following up on what that looks like as far as assessing their learning, a lot of the creation of that big overview happens in tandem. But Ms. Beck is going to talk through what that looks like at TEMA.
Yes.
I basically had to challenge for Orange to wrestling match in order to be able to talk about this because it is.
She has so much upper body strength.
It is something that I really care about, and I think that we do really well here. A great example of this, yesterday we had a whole school, or a group of teachers from a school in South Effingham that came to just visit. Because I have a presentation we do, they walk around and watch all our students learning. People come to us all the time. Other educators come to us all the time because the culture that we've created here is something that you don't see everywhere else, and it's what people want to do in their own schools. So we do serve as a model school for other educators. And STEAM really is the anchor for that. So we are a STEAM certified school. That usually is a 3 to 5 year process. We started right at the very beginning of COVID, so it took a little longer than maybe we anticipated.
Good night.
But in February 2022, we did receive our official STEAM certification from the state of Georgia. And I'm going to talk a little more about what goes into that. But STEAM definitely anchors everything that we think about and how we approach learning, how we want to see our teachers, how we want to see our students work and learn. And that really gets down to that we think all teachers are designers and all students are designers. We have a design process that our students work through when they're working through problems that was created by TEMA teachers. But our teachers also plan through that process. Everything that we talk about students doing, we place in a certain spot in that process because we want them to be engaged in that design thinking. We use the acronym all the time, PBL, and that can stand for a lot of different things. It can stand for problem-based learning, so students solving problems, project-based learning, which is the one that I think we talk about the most here. But even more specifically, we talk about place-based learning, and with our unique situation where we are on the island, I think that that's something that we lean into more than anything else. And you'll see that in all our curriculum decisions, you'll see that in our projects. There's always a deep connection to the students' community and the island. But the other part to that is our culture, and that's LYP. I believe that LYP is just as important in project-based learning as the content and the curriculum, because it's, for lack of a better term, soft skills. I don't really like that because I feel like it underplays how important those are. But the collaboration, communication, all those things that we really want, we know we want our kids to be good communicators. We know we want our students to be good collaborators because those are the skills that are going to propel them for a future that's pretty unknown. So LYP is how we frame that for our students. So that's built into even the work that our students do when they engage in project-based learning. So part of being STEAM certified is there's a very big continuum. And we just took the headings out of each of those. There's a lot of subtext for each of these headings, but this is how we were assessed. And again, it's a 3 to 5 year process. What I think this shows, though, is there's a lot of intentionality behind what we do here. PBL just doesn't kind of fall in place. We look at a continuum, and we're not in pre-implementation for any of these. We're almost in full implementation for all of them, but it is a continuum, and it's something that we're always looking at and trying to figure out how we can be better in certain areas. But these are the topics that we're assessed on. These are the big ideas that people look at when they're looking at how a STEAM curriculum is in the school. So it goes from student instruction, what the students are doing, but also the culture of staff, how staff collaborates. What do our partnerships look like? What kind of advanced curriculum are we offering? So this is a great example. We didn't just choose to offer high school science for 7th and 8th grade. That's intentional because that's actually built into the continuum, is that 75% of our students in 8th grade will be in a high school level science and math class. And we're not there in the math part yet. We do have a high school level math class, but it's not 75% of the students that qualify for that. But we do have 100% of our students taking high school oceanography in 8th grade and 100% of our students taking environmental science in 7th grade for high school credit. So this is a very big overview of what problem-based or project-based learning might look like. They're tackling realistic problems that are being solved in the real world. Increase student control. So students have autonomy over their learning. They're able to make choices. Oftentimes those choices relate to how students are showing their understanding of content. Teachers serve as coaches and facilitators of inquiry and reflection. That means you're not going to walk into a classroom and always see a lot of direct instruction from teachers. A lot of times the teacher is circulating around the classroom. Sometimes you can't see them because they're sitting at a table with a group of students and working through a problem with them. But they really act as a facilitator more than a direct instructor in this model. And students, usually, but not always, are working in pairs or groups. So when we have staff, new teachers come, I explain project-based learning in 2 ways. So there's 2 ways this can look. We do large project-based, project-based learning. So big overarching projects. Generally, we have 4 per year per grade level. And those are really big PBL units that you might be familiar with the Stars in the Sky project that 2nd grade just did, and I'll go over that a little bit. But for our middle schoolers, the Future Cities project, that was one of their PBLs, and that actually lasted a whole semester. But then we also look at day-to-day interdisciplinary instruction, and that's not void of STEAM attributes either. So I'll talk about how we kind of look at the different level, how we look at STEAM in 2 different ways. Big overarching projects, but then also day-to-day interdisciplinary instruction that has some of those STEAM characteristics embedded in them. What all of these are still driven by grade level standards. When we construct any problem or project for students, we start with the standards because that's what we're here to teach. Then we identify learning targets. What is it we really want students to be able to do? So we use backwards design. We start at the end. Where do we want students to go? You'll see a lot of the student work documented in STEAM journals. I think I mentioned STEAM journals last parent plugin, but all of our students in 3 through 8th grade use the Notes app on their iPad to organize their STEAM journals, and in K through 2, they have hand-written STEAM journals. The idea behind that is they go with them everywhere. It's a process over product. Students are they're messy. They're not organized in any way, but it's a place for students to show their learning and make connections to different content areas. When someone asks me what goes in the STEAM journal, if it can connect to another content area, that's probably a good thing to go. There's a lot of documented data collection. We have that through our scientific research program, but that's also embedded in all of our projects, larger projects, small day-to-day interdisciplinary instruction. And students use the design thinking process within this as well. Process-based thinking is part of the STEAM continuum, so even if it's not the design thinking process, sometimes it also could be just like making it plain and supporting evidence. I love these graphics. This graphic, both of these are from PBL Works, which is a great website. But a lot of times people mix up what a project is versus project-based learning. So you can think of, if you want to think of it like this, a project, we kind of think of traditionally as something that is at the end of maybe a lesson or a unit that a teacher teaches. And it's something that students usually do alone. Sometimes they're done at home. They're not always driven by content standards, whereas project-based learning is integrated. Teachers are teaching the standards through the project. It's not just it's not the dessert at the end of the learning. It's driven by student inquiry, community partnerships are built in very early on in the process. When we're creating projects, when teachers design projects, because these are designed by teachers, we start with the standards, and we start to think about learning targets, and then we craft a problem statement. And then we usually pause, because we want to bring in other experts. So this is when we reach out to community partnerships to help craft that problem statement and make it a little more authentic and connected to the community. And that's something we do really well here. Process over product. That means that when you're giving students a problem, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, even a 14-year-old, you might have this idea of what you want that to look like at the end, and it doesn't always turn out like that. That's okay, because the most valuable part of the experience when students are engaging in this process, is the process. It's them working through all those challenges, solving a problem. I tell people all the time, I tell students all the time, I would rather them try for something that they think that even in the back of my mind, maybe that's not something you can achieve. I'd rather them try to shoot for that and not quite hit that than play it safe and say, oh look, I said I was going to do this and here it is and it's perfect. It's aligned to academic standards. There's a lot of collaboration in class, and the teacher guides that problem, and there's always some sort of real world context. Okay, the next part is, again, there was two lenses for STEAM. We've had the big projects, and now the next lens is the day-to-day interdisciplinary instruction. Teachers have to teach sometimes just standards. There are math standards that have to be taught. But that doesn't mean that it's void of all of the STEAM characteristics. So I think of this as this is a great graphic because it's like a dimmer switch. You might say, okay, this is not attached to a big project, but I am going to connect it to another content area. I can see this connection in social studies and ELA, and I'm going to have the kids collaborate on that. Well, you're turning that dimmer switch up a little bit because collaboration and integrated instruction are two of those characteristics of STEAM education. It's not a full-blown PBL where they're out in the field collecting data, but it's just some of those pieces are there. Maybe you want students to show their understanding of a chemistry concept, and they're going to create a video to do that. They're turning that dimmer switch up just a little bit. So those are just some examples of how sometimes we don't always engage in full-blown project-based learning, but there's still day-to-day interdisciplinary instruction that's happening that it has those STEAM characteristics that are baked into the way that you teach here. So why do this? Because it's what's good for students. This is what's preparing our students to be successful in the future. But it also increases long-term retention of content. This is not cramming for a test, obviously. But what it does do is it helps the content resonate with students, and it really does stay with them for much longer. It helps students perform as well or better than the traditional learners in high-stakes tests. So there are connections to standardized tests and project-based learning. And it improves problem solving and collaboration skills and attitudes towards learning. And I think we all know that. I'm sure when you have students here, they might come home and they might even talk about challenges that they face when they're working in groups with their peers. But it's good that they're working through those problems with their peers. That is just as valuable as the content standards that we're teaching them, because they're learning skills that they're going to be able to take with them for a long time. We're all designers, and this goes back to that very beginning foundational part of our culture that I talked about early on. But everybody engages in the design process. The unit plans that our teachers use to actually collaboratively create the problems, each one of the sections aligns to one of these sections of the design process that we use here at TEMA. Students will identify often where they are in the design process. In their STEAM journals, we talk about that. It's intentional, it's explicit, and it is a really important part of how students learn. So what does this look like? This is just a very simple graphic over here of how some content connections might connect to a problem. One of my favorite PBLs that 7th grade engaged in this year was the Migratory Bird Day, the Shorebird Festival that they designed. They designed this. And the idea of it was to raise awareness about shorebirds. Now I challenged that a little bit more because I said, how does raising awareness actually solve a problem? So they actually collected data from the people that went to the Shorebird Festival beforehand and then collected it afterwards to see if was what they designed effective. And if not, how could it be better, more effective? What kind of rhetoric, what kind of learning helped people learn more content? So they actually analyzed that data afterwards to see if this did solve the problem of people not having an understanding of migratory shorebirds and the kinds of things that we can do to protect them. But you can see over here, Visual Art designed this t-shirt, which was part of a contest. The contest was actually posed by Manomet. They actually came to it originally, so they're an organization that does a lot of bird walks around here, does a lot about conservation, and so they partnered with our team to help design this PBL and drove this PBL. There was all our science standards that were attached to that about energy and the ecosystem. Film documented the whole event. Music, if you had a chance to go, it's really fun. They rewrote a bunch of classic rock songs to have bird themes and played live out there. ELA designed informational pamphlets, so there's a lot of ELA connections you can make in STEAM. And math evaluated data related to bird populations. They also created these leashes and had to actually measure the tension that a leash could hold because you have to keep your dogs on the leash to protect the migratory birds that are nesting. So there was a lot of great connections that different content areas were able to make and had students be able to make those connections too. And here's just some pictures of the event. One of the big things about a project versus project-based learning, project-based learning, you always have a broader audience. It's not just in a project system, you return that into your teachers, maybe you'll show your parents. Bird Day, we had our kindergarten, first and second grade students actually went to attend Bird Day, which our middle schoolers love, but it also was an event that was open up to the public. So we had a portion of the day during the school day where all the students came that were in lower grades, but then we had the event go all the way to 6 o'clock, and members of the community were able to come through as well. This is also one of my favorite projects. Second grade does an amazing job of connecting artistic movements, their PBLs. And so one of the projects is called Art in the Sky, and they look at patterns of the sun and the moon. But in addition to that, they look at that through the lens of impressionist artists. So they do a lot of research, which you can see right here. They're actually researching things at Van Gogh. But this is where in STEAM, we hold the arts to the same rigor that we hold academic standards. So this is not an art lesson where they're examining the brush strokes of Van Gogh on their iPads and then writing about that in their school journals. This is something that they're doing in their classroom. And here, you have more students kind of examining narrative through that scientific concept. But this is the best part here. And this is one of my favorite instructional strategies. This is called a data jam. And a data jam is a mashup of art and data. So students collect data and they display that data through art. And this is actually the direction the painting is supposed to go. Here you can see the students collected information about daylight. So they were measuring how much sunlight was each day, and you can see how that's changing here. The sun's cut, and then they take that data and they try to interpret and visualize that data, create with a watercolor painting, using the techniques that they learned from their studies of impressionist artists.
That piece is for sale.
I know that's a kind of a mouthful in trying to make that connection, but I mean, what do we have here? We have the art, we have art, we have art history, we have ELA, they're writing an artist statement. They have their math, they're analyzing data, they're making high-level connections to different content areas there. So that's absolutely one of my favorite PBLs as well because it does. I love how it relates to art so much.
It's not as complex, but really it's not. I mean, if you're at a great level and they're understanding it and able to from start to finish, and this is what they're producing. But yeah, when you explain it, it's like, wow,
it is
that's
complex.
impressive, you know?
It is complex, and that's all our teachers. I mean, if I could do anything today, it would be just to pull back that curtain a little bit so you can see the kinds of things that they do. These don't happen by accident. This is all very intentional. And it's a lot of work. And it takes really talented people to do this. Not any teacher can do this either. It takes the best teachers that can do that. And we have what we have here. We have the very best teachers that are very creative and they very much embrace design thinking and can design that for students.
Do you want to click on the planning document, or do you want to?
Oh yeah, you can see that. So I did put this in here because I did want to show you that this is the work that goes into it, and it's not just one teacher that works on it, but this is our template that we use to plan through. Can you scroll down?
Oh yeah.
Thanks. And you can see it follows each steps of the design process. Each of these different colors is a different teacher coming in here to put information in. So it's not just the second grade teachers put information in. It's the art teacher will come in and put work in. The music teacher, Ms. Whitfield will, and sometimes that works. Sometimes Ms. Whitfield might do the project in the class when she has a student, but sometimes she acts as a consult to our second grade teachers and says, hey, this would be a really cool thing for you to be able to do in your class. Because again, we hold those
And they're also peer reviewed, which is neat. Yeah.
We do, one of the things that we ask all of our teachers to do on a quarterly basis is we have a document and they can get paired with a completely different grade level, a completely different set of teachers. And even if these projects are something that are ongoing, we're constantly refining them through peer review. So our teacher will trade and they'll look at things like STEAM characteristics. They'll look at sustained inquiry through the design process and actually give each other feedback on that work and make adjustments to that. That's part of the process. When you're a designer, design is iterative. I don't think the designers are ever really happy with their final product, so we're always constantly refining these projects to try to make them better.
And just
But you can see, again, just intentionality behind the work that's there. It does seem simple when you see the final product, but and one of the things that we focus on integration with, and something that we also do very well here, is we consider all of our students on every end of every spectrum, but inclusion students, any students that might require VIP, we also build in our gifted supports and PBLs. And the great thing about having open-ended projects is that we're able to support all of our students and give every student what they need through a project-based approach.
is that it? Yeah.
Any questions about STEAM or PBL? There's so much more, but
I mean, I have a question, just as I get ready to, and I've shared this in the reality, but, until they get ready to go to middle school, and I know the numbers are already there. What have you seen from obviously I've found that the project base is fantastic, and it's one of the things that draws people to the school. So through elementary, it's been fantastic. Have you found that transitioning from elementary to middle school with that type of learning has been just as successful, or is it even actually better at the middle school level versus what they're able to accomplish and what they're able to retain versus is that too broad of a question? I'm just kind of
I would say when I think about the great thing about middle schoolers and even upper elementary is the students are a little more independent. So I think there's a lot more opportunities in the middle school PBL for even more autonomy. In elementary school, you're still teaching a lot of skills. So we might focus on in fourth grade a lot of filmmaking skills. But now when those students get to sixth grade, we don't actually have to teach those skills as much because then they're ready to kind of say, hey, I want to show my understanding of this topic through a film. So I think that's one of the benefits of having a project-based curriculum from elementary to middle is that some of those skills are going to become a little bit more. Did that answer that question?
yeah, it did. Because this is your first year of having eighth grade, right?
It is.
Graduating. So I am curious too. Is there a process in which y'all will kind of are able to collect data and how well your kids coming out of here out of middle school and going into high school, how well they'll adjust and or not even just like how well they'll do from a rigorous academic standpoint in a high school setting?
Yes, do you want to talk about it?
You can talk about it.
Finally get to say something. We are actually keeping track of where our students go. We just talked yesterday. We got notified that all 7 of our students that applied to DC were accepted, which was very nice to see that. What we want to do is track where students, the choice program results come out next week. So where are our students going? And we're going to check back around mid-semester next year and just make sure that students actually stayed where they said they were going to go and that's going well. And then yes, I'm really hoping to continue to just check on our students and see how they're doing. I was at another middle school that had this sort of experience for kids, and all I can tell you anecdotally is that other educators, other school leaders were always excited to have students come out of an environment where they had to work together and they had to collaborate, and they could still be engaged academically. And student self-report, students coming to me and saying, I got early acceptance too. I get to school. I have the plan for the next 4 years. I know where I'm going. High school was challenging, but not as much as I saw other people struggle. I mean, it's just this is feedback that people
Yes.
Well, so just yes, and I was thinking back to having been in middle school and already having groups of students move on to high school to see their success. But the other thing is rigor is built into STEAM curriculum. That was part of the continuum. So addition to that, there's the academic rigor that's just really intensive with high school level classes. But yeah, absolutely, they're prepared to do that. In fact, I think sometimes the challenge for students is it's less engaging when they move on to high school, because they're so used to engaging at a much deeper level with these standards, and then they're going to a more traditional classroom. That actually tends to be the bigger challenge.
I can see that.
That's absolutely the two things I wanted to highlight from what Ms. Beck spoke about. One is, you know, we had a group here yesterday. They were in middle school, looking at our middle school kids, and we always ask them, so what did you see? What were your first thoughts about what, you know, before they leave? We're like, tell us more about your experience. To a person, pretty young.
Give me the floor.
To a person, they were like, these kids are so engaged. And, you know, not listed here and not mentioned here, but we also do deep dives on, you know, recent research on student engagement. John Hattie, John Almaroad, their work that has to do specifically with behavioral engagement versus cognitive engagement versus emotional engagement. And that's really what you see a lot in our classrooms. Kids are emotionally invested in what they're working on. And all it takes is for you to go in and sit down and ask your kids, what are you working on? And they can explain to you with a lot of depth what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I can tell you, for any of you that go to a lot of other schools, that is not the typical experience if you even go into a classroom of what kids are going to tell you. So Ms. Beck is absolutely right. We also have had kids self-report to us that they're like, yeah, high school's going okay. I'm doing what I gotta do. And I'm like, okay, that's tragic, but I get it. The other thing that I would just want to lean into from the presentation is the emphasis that, and I know that we're going to talk about this next month. We talk about, you know, how people work here, but when Ms. Beck says that this isn't easy, I want to make sure that, you know, if you have friends that are educators, they would probably tell you our expectations for what teachers do is pretty high. It's not unrealistic, but it's pretty high. In a lot of schools, teachers are hired. They're given a curriculum, sometimes given a script of what to say, and then they're given a key, and they're like, go teach. And we talk a lot about how that's not teaching. That's not what a lot of educators go to school to become educators to do. But that is a pretty, you know, as Ms. Beck talked about before, a lot of schools are designed around the floor. Like, you just go teach this lesson that we gave you with the pieces that we gave you to teach it with, and you're gonna be fine. Sure. It's not what we do here. And we ask so much of teachers and have such a realization of that we do create incentive plans for that. I mean, the way that we incentivize people to continue to be here is by recognizing the hard work that we ask them to do and attaching some value to that we can compensate them for, because we get it. Like, we're asking you to do more and to be more. And in any other place as a teacher, you might not be asked to do this, but if you're going to be here, this is what everybody expects. And I also think that helps our culture. It's not just the culture of what our expectations are for kids, but kids see teachers working hard for them, which is also kind of a big deal. It's not uncommon for kids to walk in and see a group of teachers working on something that's for them. And then they're not surprised that we have the expectation that they do the same with each other. Does that make sense? Yes.
Once they go to how do you have any way that you can teach them so many years because I know different schools have different things. So I don't know when Jay go to a school and he gets in trouble because he used to be engaged with somebody.
Sure.
And then when he finally like, well, I just did this right here. So how do you have a way that we can teach them now? Look, when we get in high school, this is not the way it's gonna be. But when it's instilled in them, it's something that automatically happens. So how can we teach them now to not be so engaged but still be engaged when it comes to this time to like elevate?
I'll answer and then I'll let Ms. Beck answer if she wants to. As she said, LYP is a big part of what we talk about. And those expectations are embedded in every class and everywhere they go, right? So contributing is a big one, but it's having kids understand that contributing sometimes is in a group and sometimes it's just what you do independently, right? Having them learn how to communicate and collaborate when it's acceptable. I will tell you that, I mean, we gave you guys a big broad overview. There's still times in class that it's independent work and you're just doing that yourself. And part of that piece in middle grades is helping kids understand that balance, right? That there are definitely still going to be times that you work with someone else, you know, hopefully, whether you're in high school or even in college, like these units, these understandings you're trying to work on, you're going to have a chance to work with others. But there's also times that you're going to be on your own. Everything about middle grades is trying to teach and reinforce independence in kids in a way that's socially appropriate, right? Which it's hard. It's hard to teach middle school kids to be socially appropriate anyway. But you're looking at their work and you're looking at their environment. So, you know, we hope to come right alongside parents and partner with you about what your values are, the things that you expect, and parent events and having parents volunteer and being in classrooms. I mean, this is how we can ensure that your expectations are our expectations and that your kids see that every adult in their life cares about the same things as them. Ms. Beck.
Over half of our middle school teachers were high school teachers. They have a really good understanding of what students need to be able to do and to be prepared to move on to high school. And they do an excellent job of making sure that those skills are intentionally taught and students are prepared. And we're feeling very confident about this 8th grade class and the things that they're going to be able to do. And anyone who's ever had a student, which some of you, move from elementary to middle school, you see the difference in the expectations for academics. I mean, we build those expectations in as well. So it's not like the students are going to go in, I don't think, into high school and struggle academically. It just might not be as interesting or fun, which learning should be fun.
Yeah, I can't do anything about other schools not making them fun. I just invite them here, try to show them.
We can rally you at high school.
So this is fantastic, by the way. This is amazing to see kind of, I mean, I know that my fifth grade was doing all these things, but seeing the big picture and the final product and how it all relates was amazing. And so my question is, how maybe we as parents, how would we help y'all with this? Because we don't want to, I'm not asking for y'all to do more work so that we can see the final product, but is there some sort of, you know, showcase or something that we can do quarterly or a newsletter that kind of
Showcases should be built into this. And making more of an effort, I think, to invite families to that is really important. We talk a lot about doing like a quarterly or end of the year showcase. What I like giving teachers that autonomy to kind of choose when they want to do that, because I feel like that's a little more authentic and they're not trying to time everything all perfectly to say, okay, here's the end of everybody's project. Yes. But so this, that 7th grade bird day was a great example. Every parent was invited to that. Future cities families were invited to. I definitely can see that in elementary, and I've thought about what you said at the board meeting as well. In an elementary classroom, we probably could strengthen communicating that more and inviting families more in for that showcase piece of it, because that 2nd grade showcase was great. They showcased to kindergarten students, and kindergarten did the same. They flip-flopped because they had a project that kind of mirrored that, and it was really cute and wonderful. But it would have been wonderful also if, as parents, you were able to come in and see those pieces. Sometimes the audience is really specific though. So for example, 4th grade partners with Boathouse, and the problem was actually posed to them by that group, and so they presented directly back to them to try to give that solution to the organization. So sometimes it's really specific, but I think that's something that we could focus on and probably work on creating more showcases for families to see that work.
And I don't think that's more work for us.
No,
that's
it's not.
Part of growing, it's sort of that natural progression that we want. We do. We've been talking since the very beginning about these big showcases, these opportunities for kids to present and parents to come see. And we're absolutely getting back to where that's something that we know we can manage. Space is always an issue for us. You know, figuring out how we do some of those things. I mean, even parking is like sometimes rough. So it is also trying to figure out how we balance that, maybe a grade level instead of K1, 2, or 3, 4, 5. I mean, when you say middle grades, I mean, you could bring in 300 plus people in the building, and that's just direct family contact, right? So we do try to think about how this can work in a way that's meaningful, and also to kind of balance what Ms. Beck said. Like, we don't want to like say, okay, well, if you don't have it by the showcase, you don't get a good grade, right? When we talk about process all the time, there are deadlines, but you know, we also try to be mindful of everything that kids have going on, and everything that parents and teachers expect of them.
And one last thing, sorry,
go
looking
ahead.
forward is the calendar next year has built-in conference days, and I think that's going to be a great opportunity for students to build all of this into a portfolio and be able to talk to you and share that with you, because the intention behind that is we want those conferences to be student-driven.
Yeah, I loved that when our fourth grader paper
Yeah, no,
conference
that's
was
a
earlier in the fall. It was amazing, and she took such ownership. I mean, we were really impressed with, well, she had such enthusiasm. Sometimes it's hard to get a little, see her get motivated about things, and she was so motivated and was so mature up here. Was giving her a little speech on everything, and so that's what I think too. I think having the kids present in some way, shape, or form, you know, I think that would be amazing to kind of tie it all together. Just thinking about advocacy and how we as parents can promote our school and get the community, you know, get the word out to our community about TINA. You know, sometimes I struggle with like, what exactly are they? I mean, I know I trust that y'all are doing amazing things, and I know that you are, but I like seeing kind of the big picture and being able to talk about it like that is really helpful.
And that's like using the design process as an anchor for conversations. Like, you can say, what phase are you in at school? You know, and they know the vernacular. And so now you do too, right? So you have a common language to talk about these things and get more out of them. Because there is a certain amount of caution too about, you know, inviting parents at the end of each quarter. There's a pressure that comes with that. There's, you know, so to the point about process, it is kind of good for them to just, you know, be proud of their work in its own right, and that can be its own balance with the process of learning too.
Let me say too, I mean, part of the reason that today's parent plug-in was designed the way it was is because we understand that a lot of parents are myopic, right? But you know what your kid's doing. That's fine. Thanks for that, by the way. We're glad that you know and you're plugged into what your kid or children are doing. Fine. But it is, when you have that lens, it's really sometimes hard to see all of these pieces. And that's what you trust us for. Thank you. But we think it's really important that you see all of the back end of this, as Ms. Beck said earlier, just kind of pull the curtain back so you can see just a little. For everything that you might have seen related to something that is arts related, remember there's professional development that's gone into that, there's practice that's gone into that, there's faculty meetings that have gone into, like, there's so much to, and just a piece of a unit. When she talked about the STEAM continuum from the Department of Education, there's 16 different criteria, and I know that, like, we gave you that list, but under each of those headings, there's like subheadings and expectations for each of those areas, right? And so we're not going to belabor all of that for you, but just so you know, aligning all of those pieces is something that creates the culture that you want your children to learn at. That's what we're doing. And we thought it was important to see that, as Ms. Beck said earlier, there's a lot of intentionality to this. Sometimes it might feel like, oh, it's great. Island school, we're having a good time. We are. We're having a great time. One of the things that people also, and I think I've said this in the past, they always remark about is, whoa, like, your teachers are serious about education. We are. Like, this stuff we take completely seriously. We have a great time. It's an amazing, there's so much camaraderie here, so much collegiality. But when you want to talk about designing work for kids that leads to outcomes that
how is the gifted integrated into this?
Right, so like Becky was talking about earlier,
What
like,
do they do differently? Or
yeah,
more
some of the
powerful?
elements obviously lend themselves to gifted learning. There is an expectation if you're a teacher here that you have your gifted endorsement. So all of our classroom teachers, I think, are either endorsed and gifted or in that process right now, which is it's a year long on top of what they're already doing in school. So if they're doing all of this and they're also getting their gifted endorsement, that's extra nights and weekends where they're going to class and doing other stuff. And it's teaching them how to enrich lessons for their gifted students. For a lot of our students, though, those same strategies are good for everyone. We are like looking specifically at our intentionality behind enrichment. So, for example, not all kids are gifted in mathematics, right? So, by the way, first job, I taught high school math and science. But anyway, so not everybody is gifted in math, but for students that are, like, you want to make sure that there's some connections in the unit that they can display their giftedness, right? And that maybe we're assessing them on their natural proclivity in math. Same thing for kids that might be highly verbal, same thing for kids that might be highly creative. Like, there are aspects of the units, in all the units, that kids can demonstrate that. It is up to the teacher who is gifted indoors to ensure that those connections are there and that we're reinforcing and giving opportunities for kids for enrichment in the same way we do that for kids that might be struggling, whether it's remediation or they have special needs. If you guys have ever seen the bell curve of children, kids that are identified as having special needs and needing support are on one end of the bell curve, and kids that are gifted are the exact same on the other side. Like, their needs, that specificity for what they have to have is just on the other side of the bell curve. So we really try to make sure that as we're looking for the creation of those units, that those connections are there. And just like special education, gifted endorsed teachers have to make sure that that enrichment piece belongs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily like more work per se for the student that's gifted, it's more challenging for that student.
Can I paint a picture for you?
Yeah.
I'm gonna paint a. I'm
It
gonna,
was totally different than here.
I want.
Hey, I got put on a bus and sent on the other end of the county like once
Yeah.
a week. That helped me.
Thinking about it now, it doesn't apply to any of my other classes.
It was an extra list of spelling words. But the way it looks here, actually, so this is something that you maybe you know, this project the students were working on in third grade. They are doing a study on erosion, but they were creating picture books digitally on using their iPads about erosion, and they had to write a whole script, and they were going to share those with younger students. But when I went in the classroom and students were all working on this, all the students, they were paired up. They were doing it independently, but they were giving a lot of feedback to each other during the process. So I would say this is, while it's attached to a PBL, this is a great example of that dimmer switch. But in the back of the classroom, there was a group of students, and they were all writing their own author bibliographies to go along with that. And while we are not necessarily putting a little gold star on those students and saying, congratulations, you're the gifted student doing this extra work, but they are, right? Those are the students back there doing this extra piece that the teacher, who is highly trained to do those things, to say, like, we would really, I think this would be a great way for you to incorporate more informational writing in your, even though this might be a narrative. So they were doing that. Now, if we want to talk about different types of giftedness, there was also a group of students that had their iPads and they were zoomed really close in, and they had their styluses, and they were doing some really cool details and really neat shading with some of the tools in the drawing app, and they were really focused on that creative element of that. And again, it doesn't necessarily have a gifted stamp there, and it's possible there are students that are not gifted that really wanted to show that creativity, but that is that opportunity for those students who are gifted creatively to show that and demonstrate their learning through their giftedness.
Oh, good.
I don't want him to be like pulled out, you know, or like, and he said that, he's like, I don't really know what's different, you know.
Well, and that's been the solution for so long, right? I mean, in so many schools, is that students that are identified as gifted, they get an extra packet, or for times that they're pulled out, still responsible for the work when they go back. I mean, that's really frustrating for the gifted kid, right? Because they're like, so perpetuating the idea that when you're really good at something, you just get more to do, right? Does that ever happen to anyone? Hey, thanks for doing a good job. Here's more job. right? That's not really going to, those are the kids that are like the quickest sometimes to tune out and be like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? That's not keeping them engaged, right? So this is our way to make sure that we're providing those opportunities. Morning, Matt. Other questions? It doesn't have to be about this, by the way, Liz. Yes.
Math and middle school, what is the point of, say you have a high achiever in math and they're kind of like, oh, I'm not having that last year. And, other schools like you don't have enough students to say, okay, this is advanced, this is enough to show math. How is that progressively driven as a grade then? Like by 8th grade, that they're aware, the other kids at other schools would be to go into a higher level.
So actually, and it's a great question. Ms. Beck is chomping at the bit to answer this. Because it was in the curriculum guide. She's also really bashful and not going to tell you that she helped write the math curriculum for the state. Yes. But even though we don't have a large middle school, Ms. Beck has done a really good job in listening to teacher feedback about how we can scale students into or through compacted curriculum in 6th and 7th with an opportunity for them to take algebra, it's the accelerated algebra class or high school credit when they're in 8th grade. But do you want to talk about that?
And is that the same for the would be the top?
So it's all changing right now.
Yeah.
New math standards from the state are rolling out next year. They're great. They're a lot more simplified. There's a lot less, which is going to allow teachers to go deeper, which is what our students need to help build those foundational skills. But one of the other things they looked at was equity in accelerated curriculum in math. It used to be that at the end of 5th grade, we would identify the students we thought should be in accelerated curriculum, and that was it. You start to get fast-tracked in a compacted curriculum, and so then in 6th grade, you take 6th and half of 7th. In 7th, you take the other half of 7th and 8th, and then in 8th grade, you take high school level math. There was never ever another point to identify those students.
That happened to me when I moved here, because I moved to Pennsylvania and we weren't at the same level as scores were, but I got up to that kind of level and in high school I took 3 math classes at once, because I so it's like I don't want kids to do that catch up.
You didn't have to go to 10th grade.
Well, it's changed now. They're actually waiting a little bit, and they're saying, okay, there's 3 different decision points throughout a student's high school career where we could move them into an advanced track. And the benefit of doing an advanced track, if that's something you want your students to do, not just for the rigor because it's best for them, but that also frees them up to be able to take some of the advanced math classes in high school, which they wouldn't necessarily be able to do if they were starting in a lower level math class. Doesn't mean it's impossible. You might have to double up and things like that. Exactly. So there's no more compacted. There is no more compacted curriculum. The state solution was to say, okay, you're going to do 8th grade and 9th grade at the same time, which that is a lot to ask of students and teachers. So I think we've come up with a really good solution for this, and we're piloting it this year. But with our 7th grade students, we started identifying them in October and November, saying, okay, who do we think can do this? Because we don't want to put anyone in a high school level class if we don't think they're going to be successful. That grade goes on their GPA for high school. And if they're not, it can be really frustrating. So there's no point in rushing it. We want foundational skills to be built first. But in October or November, we start looking at MAP scores and saying, okay, who's in the 85th percentile and higher? And then we also look at other things, because there were students that we included that weren't necessarily there, but based on teacher recommendations, just student drive. And there are, Miss Allison created a very thoughtful independent curriculum through Khan Academy, and then she created some assessments that students engage in 3 different units that's partnered with Lunch and Learn and also study groups that students do independently while they're in 7th grade. This all starts in January. And then the students have 2 chances to kind of take some assessments to see if they can qualify for that. And if they qualify, then yes, then we would say, okay, great. You know, you've met all these pieces. You've gotten some of the 8th grade standards under your belt, so we're not going to have to teach 8th grade and 9th grade all at once. So it's a lot of those big concepts that we know students are going to need to know. The students are really already driven because they're doing a lot of it independently, with the exception of the study groups and lunch and learn. And then we're saying, okay, you're the group that is going to be prepared to move on to middle school. We have a group of students in high school. We didn't compact their curriculum, high school curriculum in 8th grade. We didn't compact it last year. And we just said, you know, this would make it easier for them. However, I mean, by all accounts, everyone's going to be really successful if we look at all of our measures that we use to look at that.
I'm wondering, what can we do at home when it comes to math? Because from they going from one school to this school, it's like he excelled in math, and now I'm looking like, wait a minute, what's really going on? So the curriculum is totally different. So he's struggling now when he knows it, and he loves math, he loves numbers, he's quick on his feet. But when it comes to the actual work and showing the work, it's like he's kind of sluggish with it. So what can I do as a parent to help him understand math or understand your curriculum based on what he's coming, or where he's coming?
7th grade, right? Okay. So one of the things that we say we don't do a lot of homework here, but all of our students in middle school do get a little math homework, just a little, and it's practice. And they have time in class to do it too, but that would be a great thing to look at with them, is the math homework. And just say, you know, what are you working on? Can I help you with it? Yeah, bring it home.
We both get to understand, because now they have this new type of math book. I always thought 1 + 1 = 2, you know, 1 + 1 still get the same answer, but it's a long way of doing it, and I think that's the confusion that he's getting. It's a longer way than what I'm teaching him. He's like, Mama, that's wrong. I said, no, it's got the same answer, but when he takes it to his teacher, the steps that he has to go to get to that.
So 2 things. Your teacher, I know the teacher would say to you, teach your way too. This is a conversation that I've had with a lot of parents in our math department. Mm-hmm.
He's a math guy, and he's like, no. They're like, no, you're gonna.
There's more than one way to
Yes, exactly.
No one way is a bad way. A lot of those longer methods, the intention behind that is it's teaching students that, and you can probably speak to this just as well as I can, former math teacher, but it's teaching more of a foundational, deeper understanding versus just like coming up with the answer.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the goal is to get them to be conceptual mathematical learners so they can look at a problem and dissecting. I mean, that from preschool on, that's just pattern recognition. So, you know, the multiple ways you can teach it just gives them more, you can take fractions as an example. You know, how many kids do or don't know that that's actually just division, right? They learn it with a slash, they learn it with a, like a fraction, they learn it with the thing with the dots on top, So any time you have a different lens teaching you math, there's more ways to make connections, right? Because they might have learned it in class that it's division, and then you can teach them that, it's a 1/4 of a cup when you're baking with them, right? So there's all these different ways to connect those dots. So I don't think it's a bad thing.
Well, and if you want more, I encourage you to reach out to the teacher.
Yeah.
They're more than happy to provide additional resources. There's so many great online resources when it comes to math. I'm a big fan of Khan Academy. There's a lot of research behind students just practicing a little bit on that. I also like that it's not gamified.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they get familiar with the platform, and they have great SAT prep too. That's free. So I'm going to stop
that,
the
and I want to
recording.
lean into the last thing